Welcome back, everybody. Today we're diving into a really interesting idea from Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Sounds good.
We'll be focusing on Chapter 5,
Okay.
Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy.
Yeah.
And we've got some excerpts picked out here that we can kind of go over, and hopefully it'll spark some conversation.
Awesome. Sounds great.
So are you ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's do it. I'm really interested to see what Housel has to say about this.
So right off the bat,
Okay.
Housel drops this idea that really made me stop and think. He says, good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up.
Ooh, that's a good one.
What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's so easy to get caught up in, chasing the next big win, like the next hot stock or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But Housel, I think, really reminds us that the real key to building wealth is about avoiding those big mistakes, those big blunders that can really set you back.
Yeah, and he illustrates this point with a fascinating story comparing two investors during the 1929 market crash.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we've got Jesse Livermore, who is this brilliant but risky stock trader.
Okay.
And then you've got Abraham Jermansky, who is a successful real estate developer.
Interesting.
So Livermore, he actually made a fortune betting against the market during the crash.
Wow.
But Jermansky, who had built his wealth steadily over time, ended up losing everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. That's a stark contrast. It really shows that even those who achieve, great financial success, they can really struggle to hold on to it.
And, that's what really brings us to, I think, one of Housel's central points in the chapter, which is that financial success is more about survival than hitting it big. It's about staying in the game for the long haul.
I like that. I think that's a crucial point that many people miss, I think. He even highlights how most publicly traded companies eventually lose almost all their value.
Yeah.
And the Forbes 400 list, that's constantly changing. Wealth can be incredibly fleeting. It seems like.
So how do we cultivate this survival mentality?
How do we do that?
Well, Housel, he shares this great anecdote about Michael Moritz, who's the head of Sequoia Capital. And he attributes their success to a constant fear of going out of business.
It's almost counterintuitive, right? You'd think that a successful venture capitalist would be brimming with confidence, but their secret weapon is this healthy dose of paranoia.
It's like even when things are going well, there's this need to avoid complacency.
I see that.
And then Housel, he goes on to explain two reasons why he thinks the survival mentality is so crucial. First, he emphasizes the importance of compounding, but with a caveat.
Okay, what's the catch?
He makes it clear that compounding is incredibly powerful, but that magic only works if you can stay in the game long enough.
Makes sense.
Even small gains can snowball into significant wealth over decades. But you need to weather the inevitable market ups and downs without getting wiped out completely.
Yeah, you got to be able to ride the waves.
And that leads to his second point. Which is this idea that the math of compounding is counterintuitive.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
He explains that losses have a disproportionately larger impact than gains.
I see. So it's not symmetrical. Okay.
So to give you an example, imagine you invest $100 and lose 50%.
Okay. So I'm down to $50.
Now, to get back to even,
you
don't need a 50% gain. You need a 100% gain.
Oh, wow. Okay. So losses, they really dig a deeper hole than wins can fill.
Exactly. So the key takeaway here is that avoiding major losses is actually more critical than chasing big wins when it comes to long-term wealth building. It's about preserving what you have so you can stay in the game.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's almost like defense is more important than offense in this case.
And this brings us to, I think, someone who embodies this principle perfectly, which is Warren Buffett.
Oh, yeah.
Housel argues that Buffett's remarkable success isn't due to some secret formula or risky bets. Instead, his success stems from consistently minimizing risk, avoiding debt, and never panicking during market downturns.
Makes sense.
So this approach has allowed him to remain invested for decades, benefiting from that power of compounding over the long haul.
So he's living proof that slow and steady with a focus on preservation can win the race.
Now, you might be thinking, well, how do I apply this to my own life?
Yeah, for sure.
And luckily, Housel distills it down into 3 key takeaways.
Okay, awesome.
That I think are really insightful.
I'm ready.
The first is to aim for what he calls financial unbreakability.
Financial unbreakability.
Okay. And it's a really powerful concept that shifts our focus from chasing these risky returns to prioritizing safety and stability.
I see. So it's about building that financial cushion that can absorb those unexpected shocks.
Exactly.
And avoiding those really high-risk scenarios that could wipe you out.
Essentially, you're aiming to reach a point where a single financial setback won't derail your long-term goals.
Okay, so you're trying to make it so that one bad thing doesn't ruin everything.
Right.
I got it.
And this ties directly into his second takeaway, which is planning for the unexpected.
Okay, yeah, that's...
In the real world, plans rarely go exactly as expected.
That's for sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So instead of trying to predict every possible outcome, you need to build contingencies into your plan and be prepared to adapt when things inevitably change.
So it's like when you're packing for a trip to a new place, you know, you research, you make plans, but you also pack for different weather conditions. And you leave room in your itinerary for those spontaneous adventures you might have.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So you're prepared, but also open to new experiences and challenges.
Exactly.
And that brings us to Housel's third takeaway. Which is cultivating what he calls a barbell personality.
Oh, barbell personality. Okay.
And this one really intrigued me.
Okay.
It's this idea of being optimistic about the future, but also paranoid about what can derail you.
So it's kind of like a contradictory thing.
Right.
Optimistic, but paranoid.
Right.
Interesting.
But think about it. To succeed over the long term, you need that optimistic outlook to keep you motivated and invested. But you also need that dose of paranoia to identify and mitigate potential risks.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying it's like a balance of hope and caution.
It reminds me of like those nature documentaries where you see a gazelle, it's grazing peacefully, but it's still hyper aware of like predators that could be lurking nearby.
Oh, yeah.
They kind of have to embody this barbell personality just to survive.
That's a really good point. It's true you have to be aware of the dangers, but also, you know, enjoy the moment and be hopeful.
Right. And Housel connects this idea to the overall growth of the U.S. economy.
Okay.
Over the past 170 years or so.
Okay.
It's been this incredible story of progress and innovation.
Right.
But it's also been marked by wars, recessions, pandemics.
Yeah, there's been a lot of ups and downs.
But despite all of these challenges, the economy has consistently trended upwards.
It's interesting how that works out.
Yeah.
Even with all the setbacks.
So it reinforces this idea that progress isn't linear.
Right.
And resilience is key.
Yeah. And maybe that barbell personality is part of it.
Right. Do you think embodying the barbell personality is crucial, not just for financial success, but for navigating life in general?
I think so. I mean, think about your own life.
Right.
You know, your career, your relationships, personal goals. Yeah. They all have uncertainties and setbacks.
Right.
And I think cultivating that balance of optimism and paranoia can really help you stay the course.
Right.
And achieve, you know, lasting success in those areas.
So before we wrap up this deep dive,
okay,
let's go back to Jesse Livermore for a moment.
Okay.
The
betrayer from the beginning.
Yeah, the one who made all the money during the crash.
Right.
Okay.
Despite his incredible skill at making money, he ultimately fell victim to the very forces he initially mastered.
That's a shame. You know, it's a real cautionary tale, I think, that highlights the distinction between achieving wealth and maintaining it.
Right.
He won some big battles, but he ultimately lost the war.
Right.
Because he didn't adapt his approach.
And his story just underscores the importance of consistently applying these principles of survival, prudence, and adaptability.
I see your point.
So as we reflect on all of this,
what key takeaways do you hope our listeners will walk away with?
Well, I hope they understand that first, you know, building wealth and maintaining wealth are two distinct skill sets.
Right.
They often require opposing mindsets.
Yeah. It's like the difference between winning a sprint versus running a marathon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't sprint a marathon.
What else comes to mind?
Well, I also want listeners to grasp the significance of that idea of survival as the foundation for long-term financial success.
Right. It's not just about hitting the home runs.
Right.
It's also about avoiding the strikeouts.
Yeah, those strikeouts can really set you back.
Right.
And lastly, I hope they'll embrace the concept of that barbell personality,
Right.
that blend of optimism and paranoia.
Yeah.
It's a powerful tool, not just for finances,
Right.
but for navigating life's complexities and achieving your goals.
It's not just about luck or talent.
Right.
It's about cultivating the right mindset to navigate those ups and downs.
Absolutely. It's about, embracing hope and caution, taking calculated risks,
Right.
while also protecting yourself from potential downsides.
When we started this deep dive, I thought we were just going to be talking about investing.
Yeah,
But it's turned into a conversation about so much more.
it really has.
We've explored resilience, adaptability, long-term thinking, and the importance of mindset.
Yeah. Housel's book really makes you think about the
Yeah.
deeper meaning of wealth and success.
So what final thought would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, if financial success is ultimately about survival,
Yeah.
what are you doing today to ensure your own financial longevity?
That's a really powerful question.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
It really encourages you to think about not just building wealth, but creating that foundation
Right.
that can weather any storm.
Yeah, it reminds us that true wealth isn't just about,
Right.
the number in your bank account, but your ability to navigate life's uncertainties
Right.
with confidence and security.
And that feeling of security and resilience
Yeah.
is something I think we can all strive for,
Yeah,
regardless of our current financial situation.
absolutely. It's about building a life that isn't, easily shaken
Right.
by those external forces.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into
Right.
getting wealthy versus staying wealthy,
Yeah.
what are your final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I encourage everyone to really reflect on the principles we've discussed today,
Yeah.
the importance of survival prudence and adaptability.
Right.
These are timeless ideas that I think can really guide us
Right.
towards a more secure and fulfilling financial future.
Remember, it's not just about getting to the top.
Right.
It's about staying there.
Exactly.
And that requires that shift in mindset
Yeah.
from focusing solely on gains to prioritizing long-term sustainability.
Absolutely. Embrace that barbell personality,
Right.
Be optimistic about the future, but stay vigilant about those potential risks.
Right.
And most importantly, take action today to ensure your own financial longevity.
Those are wise words to live by.
I try.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Sounds good.